Welcome back to Crime Unveiled. Tonight, we delve into a case that shocked the nation, the Menendez Brothers. It's a story of privilege, betrayal, and a chilling double homicide that continues to generate debate decades later. On the surface, Lyle and Erik Menendez seem to have it all: a life of luxury in Beverly Hills, successful parents, and a promising future. But beneath the veneer of wealth and success, a darker narrative was unfolding, one that would culminate in a brutal act of violence. We'll be examining the complex layers of this case, from the brothers' upbringing to the fateful night of their parents' murders, exploring the psychological and societal factors that may have contributed to this tragedy. Join us as we unpack the Menendez brothers' case, a story that asks us to confront uncomfortable questions about family, justice, and the human condition. The Menendez case isn't just about a double homicide. It's a story that captivated the public imagination because it challenged our understanding of family dynamics and the dark secrets that can fester beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. Jose and Kitty Menendez, Cuban immigrants, had achieved the American dream. They lived in a sprawling mansion, drove expensive cars, and provided their sons with every imaginable advantage. Yet behind the facade of affluence, there were whispers of dysfunction, of a strained relationship between parents and children. We'll be dissecting these whispers, examining the evidence, the testimonies, and the psychological profiles to piece together the puzzle of what led Lyle and Erik to commit such an unthinkable act. The question that haunted investigators and the public alike was why? Why would two young men from such a privileged background resort to such extreme violence? That's the question we aim to explore in this series. It was August 20th, 1989. A seemingly ordinary Sunday evening in the affluent neighborhood of Beverly Hills. Jose and Kitty Menendez were relaxing in their den, watching television, when the unthinkable happened. They were brutally murdered, shot multiple times at close range. The scene was horrific, a bloodbath that painted a picture of rage and violence. The initial assumption was that this was a mob hit, given Jose Menendez's business dealings. However, as the investigation unfolded, the focus shifted to a far more shocking possibility: their own sons. The sheer brutality of the crime suggested a deeply personal motive, a level of anger that pointed towards a troubled family history. We'll be examining the crime scene in detail, analyzing the forensic evidence and the ballistic reports to understand the sequence of events that led to the deaths of Jose and Kitty Menendez. The investigation into the murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez was complex and multifaceted. Initially, there were few leads, and the police were baffled by the apparent lack of motive. The brothers, Lyle and Erik, seemed genuinely distraught by the death of their parents. They wept openly, cooperated with authorities, and maintained their innocence. However, as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to appear in their facade of grief. Their lavish spending sprees, the purchase of expensive cars and watches, raised red flags. Investigators began to suspect that the brothers might be involved, but they lacked concrete evidence. It was a combination of psychological profiling, financial records, and a shocking confession that ultimately led to their arrest. This initial phase of the investigation is crucial to understanding the complexities of the case and the challenges faced by law enforcement. The brothers' behavior in the aftermath of the murders was a key element in the investigation. Lyle, the older brother, displayed a sense of composure and control, taking charge of the family's affairs and dealing with the police. Erik, on the other hand, seemed more emotionally fragile, struggling to cope with the trauma of losing his parents. These contrasting personalities played a significant role in how the case unfolded. Their differing reactions to the tragedy raised questions about their individual roles in the crime. Was Lyle the mastermind and Erik a reluctant accomplice, or were they both equally culpable? These are the questions that we will explore as we delve into the psychological profiles of the brothers. One of the most compelling aspects of the Menendez case is the psychological dimension. Both Lyle and Erik had complex personalities, shaped by their upbringing, their relationship with their parents, and the pressures of living in the public eye. Experts have offered various theories about their motivations, exploring the possibility of abuse, manipulation, and a desperate desire to escape their controlling father. We'll be examining these psychological theories in detail, considering the impact of their childhood experiences on their actions. Understanding the psychological landscape of the brothers is crucial to unraveling the mystery of why they committed such a heinous crime. The trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez was a media sensation, captivating the nation with its dramatic twists and turns. The brothers' defense team argued that they acted in self-defense, claiming years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of their father. This shocking revelation turned the case on its head, forcing the public to reconsider their initial assumptions about the brothers' guilt. The trial became a battleground of conflicting narratives, a clash between the prosecution's portrayal of the brothers as cold-blooded killers and the defense's depiction of them as victims of a dysfunctional and abusive family.
The introduction of the abuse allegations dramatically shifted the narrative of the Menendez case. It forced the jury to grapple with complex questions about the nature of abuse, the dynamics of family relationships, and the limits of self-defense. The brothers' testimony, filled with graphic details of their alleged abuse, was both harrowing and controversial. Some believed their claims, while others saw them as a calculated attempt to manipulate the jury. This element of the case adds another layer of complexity to the already intricate story, challenging us to consider the motivations and the justifications behind their actions. We will delve into the details of these allegations and examine the evidence presented by both the prosecution and the defense. Before the night of August 20th, 1989, the Menendez family resided in a seemingly idyllic world in Beverly Hills, California. Their Spanish-style mansion on North Elm Drive symbolized their affluence. Jose Menendez, a Cuban immigrant, had achieved remarkable success as an entertainment executive. Kitty Menendez, his wife, dedicated herself to raising their two sons, Lyle and Erik. Neighbors recall the family as private but seemingly normal. They often saw Jose and Kitty tending their meticulously landscaped garden, a vibrant display of colorful bougainvillea and fragrant jasmine. The sounds of laughter and splashing water often drifted from their pool area on warm afternoons, painting a picture of a family enjoying the California sunshine. The quiet, manicured streets of Beverly Hills provided a stark contrast to the turmoil that brewed beneath the surface of the Menendez household. The community itself was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where residents felt safe and secure. High walls and security gates were common, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and privacy. Luxury cars lined the driveways, a testament to the financial success of the families who called Beverly Hills home. Neighbors knew each other, if not intimately, then through shared experiences at community events and local gatherings. The rhythm of life was predictable, marked by the routines of school days, business meetings, and social engagements. This sense of normalcy made the events that unfolded at the Menendez residence all the more shocking and unsettling. It shattered the illusion of tranquility that had enveloped the community for so long. The boys, Lyle and Erik, attended private schools and enjoyed privileges that came with their family's wealth. Lyle, the elder brother, was described as charismatic and ambitious, often seen driving his Alfa Romeo sports car. Erik, the younger, was a talented tennis player with a promising future. They seemed to have everything: a loving family, a beautiful home, and access to the best opportunities. Yet, behind this facade of privilege, there were hidden tensions and unspoken secrets that would eventually erupt in violence. The contrast between their outward appearance and the inner turmoil is a crucial element in understanding the complexities of this case. The house itself, 722 North Elm Drive, was a significant element in the Menendez family's life. A sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion, it offered ample space for family gatherings and private moments. The interior was lavishly decorated, reflecting Kitty's refined taste and Jose's business success. Imagine walking through those rooms, the sunlight streaming through large windows, illuminating expensive furnishings and family portraits. The house was more than just a dwelling. It was a symbol of their achievement, a place where they entertained friends and celebrated milestones. It's difficult to reconcile the image of this opulent home with the horrific act that took place within its walls. Jose Menendez, the patriarch of the family, was a self-made man. He emigrated from Cuba at a young age and built a successful career in the entertainment industry. He was known for his demanding nature and high expectations, both in his professional life and at home. He pushed his sons to excel, instilling in them a strong drive for success. His influence was pervasive in their lives, shaping their ambitions and aspirations. Understanding Jose's personality and his relationship with his sons is critical to understanding the dynamics within the Menendez family. Kitty Menendez, a former beauty queen, was devoted to her family. She was a constant presence in her sons' lives, attending their sporting events and school functions. She created a warm and inviting home environment, often hosting elaborate parties and gatherings. She was described as elegant and gracious, always impeccably dressed and poised. However, behind this polished exterior, some accounts suggest a woman struggling with her own demons, battling insecurities and vulnerabilities
that were largely hidden from public view. The weeks leading up to the murders seemed unremarkable to those outside the family circle. There were no outward signs of conflict or distress. The family continued their usual routines, attending social events and maintaining their public image. This apparent normalcy makes the subsequent events even more perplexing. What transpired behind closed doors remains a subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. The contrast between the family's public persona and the private reality is a recurring theme in this case. The tranquility of that Beverly Hills neighborhood was irrevocably shattered on the night of August 20th. The sound of gunshots echoed through the quiet streets, piercing the silence and marking the beginning of a long and complex legal battle. The events of that night would forever change the lives of everyone involved, leaving a legacy of unanswered questions and lingering doubts. The illusion of peace and security had been shattered, replaced by a sense of unease and disbelief.
We've painted a picture of privilege, a seemingly idyllic existence for Lyle and Erik Menendez. Beverly Hills, private schools, tennis courts, a Spanish-style mansion. The trappings of wealth and success surrounded them. Their parents, Jose and Kitty, had emigrated from Cuba, building a life that most could only dream of. Jose, a driven and demanding businessman, had risen through the ranks at live entertainment, achieving considerable power and influence. Kitty, a homemaker, dedicated herself to her sons and maintained a polished facade of domestic bliss. This image of perfection, however, begins to crack as we delve deeper into the family dynamics and the events leading up to the fateful night of August 20th, 1989. We need to consider the undercurrents, the subtle shifts in behavior, the almost imperceptible shadows that begin to lengthen across this seemingly sun-drenched landscape. Yes, the picture of privilege is indeed compelling, but it's important to remember that wealth and status don't inoculate anyone from the complexities of human relationships. Beneath the veneer of success, there were tensions, secrets, and perhaps even deep-seated resentments simmering within the Menendez family. We know, for instance, that Jose was a demanding father, pushing his sons to excel in academics and sports. This pressure, while perhaps intended to foster success, could have also fostered resentment and a sense of inadequacy. The brothers' accounts of their upbringing suggest a controlling environment, where expectations were high and deviations from the prescribed path were met with disapproval. It's within this context, this seemingly perfect world, with its underlying tensions, that we must examine the events that unfolded. Reports suggest that in the weeks leading up to the murders, there was a noticeable shift in the brothers' behavior. Witnesses recall seeing them practicing shooting at a local gun range, a detail that takes on chilling significance in retrospect. Furthermore, there were unusual financial transactions, large sums of money being withdrawn from accounts shortly before the killings. These details, while seemingly innocuous on their own, begin to cast a pall over the narrative of a spontaneous act of violence. They suggest premeditation, a calculated plan taking shape behind the closed doors of the Menendez mansion. It's as though the cracks in the facade were starting to widen, revealing glimpses of the darkness within. The gun range visits and the financial transactions certainly raise red flags. They introduce an element of premeditation that complicates the initial perception of the crime as a crime of passion. The brothers would later claim self-defense, alleging years of abuse at the hands of their parents. However, the evidence of planning, the methodical acquisition of weapons, and the subsequent spending spree following the murders all seem to contradict this claim. We need to scrutinize the timeline of events, the sequence of actions taken by the brothers, to understand the true nature of their intentions. Did they genuinely fear for their lives, or were they motivated by other, perhaps darker impulses? Their actions immediately after the murders also warrant close examination. They went on a shopping spree, purchasing expensive watches and cars, seemingly unfazed by the horrific act they had just committed. This behavior, seemingly incongruous with grief or trauma, raises questions about their emotional state and their motivations. Was this a manifestation of guilt? A desperate attempt to distract themselves from the reality of their actions? Or did it reveal a callous disregard for human life, a chilling indifference to the gravity of their crime? These are questions we must grapple with as we delve deeper into the psychological profiles of Lyle and Erik Menendez. The lavish spending spree in the aftermath of the murders paints a troubling picture. It suggests a detachment from the enormity of their actions, a lack of remorse that is difficult to reconcile with their later claims of self-defense. The brothers seem to be living in a world detached from reality, a world where the consequences of their actions didn't seem to apply. We have to consider the possibility that the killings were not a desperate act of survival, but rather a calculated move to gain access to their parents' considerable wealth. This perspective, while unsettling,
offers a potential explanation for their seemingly inexplicable behavior. Let's return to the scene of the crime. The sheer brutality of the murders, the multiple gunshot wounds inflicted upon Jose and Kitty Menendez, speaks to a level of rage that is difficult to comprehend. The crime scene photos depict a scene of unimaginable violence, a stark contrast to the carefully curated image of the affluent Menendez family. This disparity, the juxtaposition of outward perfection and inner turmoil, underscores the complexity of this case. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to delve into the hidden lives and unspoken truths that lie beneath the veneer of normalcy. The violence of the crime scene is truly disturbing. It suggests something more than just a spontaneous act of self-defense. The number of shots fired, the close proximity of the wounds, points to a level of aggression that is difficult to explain away as simply fear or panic. This raw, uncontrolled violence clashes sharply with the image of the privileged, composed young men who presented themselves to the world. It compels us to examine the psychological factors at play, the potential for repressed anger and resentment to erupt in such a devastating manner. We need to consider the possibility that the killings were not an act of self-preservation, but rather a culmination of years of unspoken frustration and rage. We've established the seemingly idyllic facade of the Menendez family life, the wealth, the tennis prodigies, the undercurrent of tension. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. On the night of August 20th, 1989, that storm finally broke. The events of that evening are etched in the annals of true crime, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly perfect families. It was a Sunday, and the parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were relaxing in their Beverly Hills mansion. The brothers, Lyle and Erik, were elsewhere, their precise whereabouts a point of contention later in the investigation. What happened next shattered the illusion of normalcy forever. Around 10 p.m., the sound of gunshots ripped through the quiet opulence of the neighborhood. Neighbors reported hearing what they initially dismissed as firecrackers, a tragically common misconception in such cases. The reality, however, was far more sinister. Jose and Kitty Menendez were brutally murdered in their own living room. The scene, as described by first responders, was horrific. Both victims had been shot multiple times at close range, a level of violence that suggested something far more personal than a simple robbery. The sheer number of shots fired, the placement of the wounds, all pointed towards a rage-fueled attack. This wasn't just a killing. It was an execution. The initial police response focused on the possibility of a mob hit. Given Jose Menendez's business dealings in the entertainment industry, he was known to be a tough negotiator, and some speculated he may have crossed the wrong people. The theory seemed plausible at first glance, given the apparent professional nature of the killings. However, certain aspects of the crime scene didn't quite fit the profile of a professional hit. The excessive number of shots, the seemingly personal nature of the attack, these details suggested a different narrative, one that would slowly emerge as the investigation progressed. Another puzzling detail was the lack of forced entry. The house showed no signs of a break-in, indicating that the killer or killers were either known to the victims or had somehow gained access without resorting to force. This detail would later become a crucial piece of the puzzle, pointing investigators in a direction they hadn't initially considered. The sheer brutality of the murders, coupled with the absence of forced entry, painted a disturbing picture. It suggested a betrayal, a violation of trust within the very heart of the family. The brothers, Lyle and Erik, were the ones who initially reported the murders to the police, placing a frantic 911 call that captured their apparent distress and disbelief. Lyle's call, in particular, was scrutinized later for its perceived lack of genuine emotion. While under immense stress, his tone struck some as oddly composed, almost detached from the horrific event he was reporting. This, combined with other behavioral inconsistencies observed in the days following the murders, would eventually raise red flags for investigators. The brothers' accounts of their whereabouts that night were also subject to scrutiny. They claimed to have been at a movie theater, but couldn't provide concrete proof, like ticket stubs or witness accounts, to corroborate their alibi. This lack of verifiable evidence further fueled suspicions about their potential involvement. In the immediate aftermath of the murders, their grief seemed genuine, their shock palpable. But as the investigation unfolded, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed facade of innocence. The crime scene itself provided a wealth of forensic evidence, including shell casings and fingerprints. However, initially, none of this evidence directly implicated the brothers. The murder weapons, 2 12-gauge shotguns, were never recovered, further complicating the investigation. The absence of the murder weapons was a significant setback,
hindering the ability to definitively link anyone to the crime. It also raised questions about the brothers' potential involvement, given their familiarity with firearms and their access to their father's gun collection. The scene also indicated that the victims had been seated when the attack began, suggesting a level of trust or at least a lack of immediate threat perceived by Jose and Kitty. This further fueled the suspicion that the killers were known to them, shattering the sense of security within their own home. The positioning of the bodies, the close proximity of the shots, the sheer number of wounds, all spoke to a deeply personal and violent attack. The investigation was just beginning, but the pieces of a dark and disturbing puzzle were slowly starting to fall into place. The night of August 20th, 1989, irrevocably altered the landscape of Beverly Hills. The seeming tranquility of the affluent neighborhood was shattered by the brutal murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez. Initial reports depicted a scene of unimaginable violence, the couple having been shot multiple times in their den. The sheer number of shots fired immediately suggested something more than a simple robbery gone wrong. There was an excessive, almost frantic quality to the attack that pointed towards a deeper, more personal motivation. The responding officers were confronted with a gruesome tableau, one that would undoubtedly leave a lasting mark on even the most seasoned veterans. The house itself, a symbol of wealth and success, became a chilling testament to a family tragedy of epic proportions. Absolutely. The opulence of the Menendez home stood in stark contrast to the horrific events that unfolded within its walls. While the neighborhood was known for its high-profile residents and relative security, this crime pierced through that veneer of safety. It sent ripples of fear throughout the community, raising questions about just how secure anyone truly was, even behind gated walls and security systems. The initial shock quickly gave way to a wave of speculation. Who would commit such a heinous act against a seemingly successful entertainment executive and his wife? The very public nature of Jose Menendez's career as an executive at Live Entertainment only amplified the media attention, transforming a private tragedy into a national spectacle. The whispers began almost immediately, the rumors spreading like wildfire through the community. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. Investigators meticulously combed the crime scene, searching for any shred of evidence that could shed light on the perpetrators. Neighbors were questioned, their statements painting a picture of a seemingly normal family, although some alluded to underlying tensions. The sons, Lyle and Erik, were understandably distraught, their grief palpable in the early interviews. However, even in their grief, certain inconsistencies began to emerge. Small details in their accounts didn't quite align, raising subtle red flags for investigators. The pressure of being thrust into the spotlight, coupled with the trauma of losing their parents, undoubtedly created a chaotic and confusing environment for the young men. But amidst the chaos, the seeds of suspicion were sown, and those seeds began to germinate quickly. As the investigation progressed, the brothers' lavish spending in the months following the murders became a focal point. Expensive cars, designer clothes, watches, trips. It all seemed incongruous with the image of grieving sons. Their behavior, perceived by some as extravagant and insensitive, fueled the growing suspicion. The public's perception of the brothers began to shift, their initial sympathy slowly eroding as details of their spending habits emerged. The question became, were they genuinely grieving, or were they celebrating their newfound freedom and wealth? This seemingly callous display of wealth began to paint a different picture, a picture that was increasingly at odds with their initial portrayals of innocence. The narrative was rapidly evolving, from one of victimhood to one of potential culpability. The whispers became louder, the speculation more pointed. The community, initially united in grief and shock, became fractured by suspicion and mistrust. The very foundation of their perceived safety had been shaken, replaced by an unsettling sense of vulnerability. The opulent facade of Beverly Hills couldn't mask the fear that was creeping in. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every stranger a potential threat. The Menendez murders had exposed a darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect world. The case had become more than just a local tragedy. It was a chilling reminder that evil could penetrate even the most secure of fortresses. The investigation intensified, the pressure mounting on Lyle and Erik. Their every move was scrutinized, every word analyzed. The media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the pressure cooker atmosphere. The brothers, once viewed as victims, were now increasingly portrayed as prime suspects. Their lavish spending, coupled with inconsistencies in their testimonies, cast a long shadow over their claims of innocence. The once clear narrative of a family tragedy was becoming increasingly murky,
shrouded in suspicion and doubt. The boys, now young men under intense scrutiny, found themselves trapped in a web of their own making.
The fear that gripped the community was palpable. The Menendez murders weren't just a crime. They were a violation, a shattering of the illusion of security. People began to question their surroundings, their neighbors, their own safety. The case had exposed a vulnerability that extended beyond the confines of Beverly Hills, touching a nerve across the nation. The story of the Menendez family, once a symbol of success and the American dream, had become a cautionary tale, a dark reflection of the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic communities. The case was a stark reminder that behind the manicured lawns and gated mansions, darkness could thrive.
And the darkness was deepening. As the investigation progressed, the focus shifted from who committed the murders to why. The motive remained elusive, shrouded in a complex tapestry of family dynamics, financial intricacies, and whispered allegations of abuse. The story of the Menendez brothers was no longer simply a crime story. It was evolving into a psychological thriller, a chilling exploration of the human psyche and the potential for violence within the seemingly ordinary. The case had captured the nation's attention, not just for its brutality, but for the unsettling questions it raised about family, wealth, and the secrets that lie hidden behind closed doors. Let's delve deeper into the psychological profiles of Lyle and Erik Menendez. The brothers presented a facade of privilege, attending prestigious schools and displaying an outward sense of normalcy. However, beneath the surface, a complex psychological landscape was developing. Their upbringing, marked by their parents' demanding nature and alleged abuse, undoubtedly played a significant role in shaping their psyche. The defense argued that years of psychological trauma led to a state of fear and desperation, ultimately culminating in the killings. This narrative paints a picture of two young men trapped in a cycle of abuse, driven to extreme measures by their perceived lack of escape. However, the prosecution's portrayal of the brothers was starkly different, emphasizing premeditation and greed as primary motivators. Reconciling these conflicting narratives is key to understanding the complexities of this case. The contradictions in their outward identity are indeed striking. They were seen as affluent, successful young men with seemingly bright futures. Lyle, the older brother, exhibited a strong, almost dominant personality, while Erik, the younger, appeared more introverted and susceptible to influence. Their outward behavior in the months following the murders seemed inconsistent with the grief one might expect from sons who had just lost their parents. They engaged in lavish spending sprees, purchasing expensive cars and watches, further fueling the prosecution's argument of greed. However, the defense argued that this behavior was a manifestation of their underlying trauma, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control in their lives after years of feeling powerless. The psychological evaluations conducted on both brothers offered further insight into their mental states, revealing potential vulnerabilities and contributing to the ongoing debate about their true motivations.
The defense presented expert testimony, suggesting that Lyle and Erik suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from the alleged abuse. This diagnosis, if accepted by the jury, could have significantly impacted their perception of the brothers' actions. The prosecution, however, challenged the validity of these claims, arguing that the brothers were manipulative and calculating, using the abuse allegations as a convenient cover for their crime. This raises the crucial question of whether the brothers were genuinely suffering from deep-seated psychological trauma, or whether they were cleverly constructing a narrative to avoid responsibility. The conflicting expert opinions presented during the trial highlight the complexities of psychological assessment, particularly in high-stakes legal cases. The brothers' accounts of the night of the murders also present inconsistencies. While they claim to have acted in self-defense, driven by fear of imminent harm, the sheer number of shots fired and the manner in which their parents were killed raised questions about their version of events. The forensic evidence, including the positioning of the bodies and the trajectory of the bullets, seemed to contradict their claims of a spontaneous act of self-defense. Furthermore, the lack of any physical evidence corroborating their allegations of abuse made it difficult for the jury to fully accept their narrative. The prosecution capitalized on these inconsistencies, portraying the brothers as cold-blooded killers who meticulously planned and executed their parents' murders. The psychological impact of growing up in a household marked by high expectations and alleged abuse can be profound. The defense argued that the brothers lived in constant fear, believing they were trapped in a situation with no escape. This sense of entrapment, combined with their perceived lack of control, may have contributed to their extreme reaction. Understanding the long-term effects of such an environment is crucial to evaluating the brothers' state of mind at the time of the killings.
While the prosecution emphasized premeditation and greed, the defense maintained that the brothers' actions were rooted in a complex psychological dynamic shaped by years of trauma. It is essential to consider the broader context of family dynamics when analyzing this case. The Menendez family presented a picture of success and affluence to the outside world, yet behind closed doors, a different reality may have existed. The brothers described a household dominated by their father's demanding personality and their mother's emotional struggles. These complex family dynamics, coupled with the allegations of abuse, created a volatile environment that undoubtedly impacted the brothers' psychological development. Unraveling the intricate web of relationships within the Menendez family is critical to understanding the events that led to the murders. The lack of physical evidence supporting the abuse claims complicated the defense's case. While psychological trauma can manifest in various ways, the absence of tangible proof made it challenging to corroborate the brothers' allegations. The prosecution argued that the brothers fabricated the abuse narrative as a strategic defense tactic, highlighting the difficulty of proving psychological abuse, particularly in the absence of physical evidence. This raises important questions about how the legal system addresses cases involving claims of psychological harm. Ultimately, the jury was left to grapple with conflicting narratives and complex psychological testimony. The prosecution's portrayal of premeditated murder driven by greed clashed with the defense's argument of self-defense, stemming from years of alleged abuse. The brothers' contrasting personalities and their behavior following the murders further complicated the jury's task. Deciphering the truth amidst the conflicting evidence and psychological interpretations proved to be a formidable challenge. Let's delve into the initial stages of the investigation. The sheer brutality of the crime scene naturally led detectives to consider organized crime involvement. The nature of the killings, multiple shotgun blasts at close range, suggested a professional hit. The brothers' frantic 911 call seemed genuine at the time, adding to the initial confusion. This theory, however, quickly unraveled as investigators began to scrutinize the brothers' behavior in the days and weeks following the murders. Their lavish spending sprees, purchases of expensive cars and watches, and overall demeanor seemed inconsistent with the grief one might expect from sons who had just lost their parents. This shift in focus towards the brothers marked a critical turning point in the case. Yes, and this is where the investigation encountered its first major hurdle. The brothers had no criminal records, no apparent history of violence. It was difficult to reconcile their outward persona with the horrific nature of the crime. The lack of forced entry suggested a connection to the victims, which of course pointed towards the brothers. Yet, establishing a concrete motive proved elusive. The detectives were looking for that missing piece of the puzzle, something that could link their extravagant spending to the murders. The initial focus on organized crime, while ultimately a dead end, consumed valuable time and resources. This is a common challenge in complex cases. Investigative teams have to be careful not to fixate on a single theory, especially in the early stages. Absolutely. And then there was the issue of misleads. Early in the investigation, some witness statements hinted at possible abuse within the Menendez family. These accounts, though not initially pursued with much vigor, would later become crucial pieces of the defense's case. It's an unfortunate but common occurrence in these types of investigations. Early assumptions and biases can cause important information to be overlooked or dismissed. This can create a ripple effect, leading to delays, and even, potentially, a wrongful conviction. The pressure to solve a high-profile case quickly can sometimes be a hindrance to a thorough investigation. Let's not forget the psychological aspect of the case. The brothers were actively cooperating, or at least appeared to be. They were providing information, submitting to interviews, and behaving as grieving sons might. This created a false sense of security, a sort of investigative lull. It lulled investigators into a false sense of security, possibly contributing to the slow pace in gathering concrete evidence against them. They were literally hiding in plain sight, all the while building their alibi and preparing for their defense. It's a stark reminder of how deceptive appearances can be. And then there was the chilling aspect of the alleged taunting communications. Rumors circulated of cryptic messages or even subtle gestures from the brothers towards law enforcement. Whether these were real or simply imagined by investigators under immense pressure remains debatable. However, such rumors, regardless of their veracity, often become part of the narrative surrounding high-profile cases, fueling speculation and impacting public perception. This speculation, even if unfounded, can further complicate the investigation and add unnecessary stress to the investigative team. There is a specific theory relating to Erik Menendez's behavior. Some experts have argued it could be seen as passive-aggressive behavior disguised as cooperation. This, combined with the psychological impact of the crime on the brothers, further complicated the narrative. This makes it a difficult case study for understanding criminal psychology.
Even with the brothers' eventual confession, some mysteries of their mindset remain. The combination of these factors certainly muddied the investigative waters.
Indeed. The Menendez case perfectly illustrates the complexities and pitfalls that investigators can face. The false hope, the missed leads, and the psychological manipulation all contributed to a protracted and convoluted investigation. The pressure to deliver answers to a public desperate for closure can be immense, especially in high-profile cases. This case is a testament to the importance of meticulous evidence gathering and the delicate balance between speed and thoroughness in investigations. And let's not forget the role the media played. The constant media coverage, the public speculation, the intense scrutiny, all added to the pressure cooker environment surrounding the case. This can sometimes lead to a rush to judgment, a desire to quickly appease the public thirst for answers, even if it means sacrificing thoroughness. It reminds us of the delicate balance between public information and the integrity of the investigation. The Menendez brothers case, in all its complexities, remains a powerful study in the challenges of criminal investigation.
The brutal nature of the Menendez murders sent shockwaves through the affluent community of Beverly Hills and beyond. The seemingly picture-perfect family facade shattered, leaving neighbors and friends grappling with disbelief and fear. The idea that two sons, from a privileged background, could commit such a violent act against their own parents was deeply unsettling. This case wasn't just a crime. It was a betrayal of the perceived sanctity of family, leaving an enduring sense of unease in the community. The long-term psychological impact on those who knew the family, especially those close to Kitty and Jose, is difficult to overstate. They were forced to confront the dark underbelly of a family they thought they knew, forever changing their perceptions of trust and safety. The emotional toll on the extended family was immense. Kitty and Jose's siblings, nieces, and nephews were left to mourn their loss while simultaneously navigating the complex legal proceedings and intense media scrutiny. The trial forced them to relive the horrific details of the murders, compounding their grief. Imagine having to listen to graphic descriptions of the violence inflicted upon your loved ones, knowing the perpetrators were family members. The betrayal, the confusion, the profound sadness, it's a burden they've carried for decades. This case ripped apart their family unit, leaving scars that may never fully heal. The public nature of the trial only amplified their pain, making their private grief a subject of public consumption and speculation. Beyond the immediate family, the case had a broader impact on public perception. The Menendez brothers' defense, centered on allegations of abuse, ignited a national conversation about family dynamics, child abuse, and the complexities of wealth and privilege. While some were sympathetic to the brothers' claims, others viewed them as a manipulative attempt to escape responsibility for a heinous crime. This polarizing effect further contributed to the unease surrounding the case. It forced society to confront uncomfortable questions about the hidden struggles within seemingly perfect families and the potential for violence to erupt even in the most privileged circles. The trial itself became a media spectacle, further exacerbating the emotional strain on everyone involved. The constant media coverage, the intense public interest, the relentless analysis of every detail. It created a circus-like atmosphere that added another layer of trauma. For the family, it meant their private grief was constantly being dissected and debated in the public arena. For the community, it meant a constant reminder of the violence that had shattered their sense of security. The media frenzy surrounding the case undoubtedly contributed to the long-term unease and trauma experienced by those closest to the tragedy. Even years after the verdicts, the case continues to generate discussion and debate. The Menendez brothers remain incarcerated, serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. The enduring fascination with this case speaks to its complex and disturbing nature. It raises questions about justice, morality, and the lasting impact of trauma. The ripple effects of this crime extend far beyond the individuals directly involved, touching upon broader societal anxieties about family, violence, and the dark secrets that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly idyllic lives. It's important to remember the human cost of this tragedy. Beyond the legal arguments and the media sensationalism, there were real people whose lives were irrevocably altered. Kitty and Jose Menendez were more than just victims in a high-profile case. They were parents, siblings, friends, colleagues. Their loss left a void in the lives of those who loved them, a void that can never be filled. The enduring trauma experienced by their family and community serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of violence
and the importance of seeking justice and healing in its aftermath. The enduring impact on the community is a testament to the profound psychological effects of violent crime. The shattering of the perceived safety and stability within their affluent neighborhood left a lasting sense of vulnerability. The case served as a stark reminder that even in privileged communities, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. This awareness, coupled with the media's constant revisiting of the case, has contributed to a lingering sense of unease and a heightened awareness of the potential for violence, even in the most unexpected places. The Menendez case stands as a chilling example of the far-reaching consequences of familial violence. It serves as a reminder that behind closed doors, unimaginable tragedies can unfold, leaving lasting scars on individuals, families, and entire communities. The emotional toll of this case, the enduring trauma, and the lingering questions about motive and culpability continue to resonate decades later, underscoring the profound and lasting impact of such a violent crime. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the complexities of human relationships and the potential for darkness to exist even within the confines of family. The facade of grief, meticulously crafted by Lyle and Erik, began to crumble under the weight of mounting suspicion. Investigators, initially swayed by the brothers' tearful accounts of abuse, started to question the inconsistencies in their stories. The sheer brutality of the killings, the methodical execution-style shots, seemed excessive even for victims driven to desperation by alleged years of torment. The lavish spending spree embarked upon by Lyle and Erik in the weeks following their parents' deaths further fueled investigators' doubts. Luxury cars, designer clothes, watches, and trips to Europe, these weren't the actions of traumatized young men grappling with the sudden loss of their parents. The brothers' behavior painted a picture increasingly at odds with their initial claims of self-defense. A critical turning point in the investigation came with the emergence of a key piece of evidence, a taped confession. Erik, burdened by guilt and paranoia, had confided in his therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, revealing the chilling details of the murders. Unbeknownst to Erik, Oziel's girlfriend, Judalon Smith, had been secretly recording these sessions. While the admissibility of these tapes would later become a subject of fierce legal debate, their content proved devastating to the brothers' defense. The tapes provided a chilling glimpse into the brothers' premeditation and their calculated plan to eliminate their parents. The brothers' narrative began to shift from victims of abuse to perpetrators of a cold-blooded double homicide. The brothers' extravagant spending, coupled with the emergence of the confession tapes, provided law enforcement with the ammunition they needed. The very public displays of grief which had initially garnered sympathy now appeared as a calculated performance, a cynical attempt to manipulate public opinion. The investigation moved swiftly. No longer were Lyle and Erik perceived as grieving sons, they were now prime suspects in a brutal double murder. The walls were closing in. The arrest of Lyle and Erik Menendez was as dramatic as the crime itself. Lyle was apprehended while driving his Porsche near the family mansion. Erik, who had been competing in a tennis tournament in Israel, surrendered himself upon his return to Los Angeles. The media frenzy surrounding the arrests was intense, with reporters and camera crews documenting every moment. The brothers, once symbols of youthful privilege and tragedy, were now portrayed as cold-blooded killers. The brothers' arrest marked a significant shift in public perception. The initial wave of sympathy that had surrounded them dissipated, replaced by a growing sense of disbelief and outrage. The carefully constructed image of abused children seeking desperate measures to escape a lifetime of torment began to unravel. The arrest was not the end of the story, however. It was merely the beginning of a long and complex legal battle that would captivate the nation for years to come. The legal proceedings promised to be as dramatic and convoluted as the events leading up to that fateful August night in Beverly Hills. The brothers' contrasting reactions to the impending legal battle further fueled public intrigue. Lyle, ever the picture of composure, maintained a stoic facade, projecting an air of confidence and defiance. Erik, on the other hand, appeared visibly shaken, his demeanor reflecting the immense pressure and uncertainty of his situation. Their differing approaches to the legal challenges ahead underscored the complex dynamic between the two brothers, a dynamic that had played a pivotal role in the events leading up to the murders. The pre-trial hearings and legal maneuvering would become a media spectacle, with every detail scrutinized and analyzed by legal experts and the public alike. The admissibility of the confession tapes, recorded by Dr. Oziel's girlfriend, would become a central point of contention. The prosecution argued that the tapes provided crucial evidence of premeditation, while the defense vehemently challenged their authenticity and legality. The battle over the tapes would shape the course of the trial and ultimately influence the jury's perception of the brothers. The complexities surrounding the case,
The conflicting narratives and the high-profile nature of the defendants ensured that the Menendez brothers' trial would be unlike anything seen before. The trial was not simply about determining guilt or innocence. It was about unraveling the tangled web of family secrets, alleged abuse, and ultimately the motivations behind a crime that had shocked the nation. As the trial date approached, the nation braced itself for a legal drama that promised to be as captivating and disturbing as the crime itself. It's unsettling, revisiting this case after all this time. The sheer brutality of the killings, the methodical planning, the elaborate cover-up, and then the performance of grief. It's a stark reminder of the depths of human deception. We've explored the evidence, the psychological profiles, the societal influences, and yet, a sense of unease remains. The Menendez brothers lived a life of privilege, seemingly wanting for nothing, yet harbored such intense rage. This case challenges our understanding of family dynamics, the masks people wear, and the darkness that can fester beneath the surface of affluence and normalcy. What's particularly disturbing is how easily they integrated back into their routine after the murders, going on shopping sprees, attending concerts, behaving as if nothing had happened. Absolutely. Their calculated actions after the murders are chilling. The disposal of the shotguns, the fabricated alibi, the feigned shock and horror. It speaks to a level of premeditation that is difficult to comprehend. And remember, they almost got away with it. Had it not been for Erik's confession to his therapist and the subsequent legal battles over the admissibility of those tapes, the brothers might have successfully portrayed themselves as victims. This case raises troubling questions about the justice system, the role of wealth and privilege, and the complexities of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt when the perpetrators are skilled manipulators. It's a sobering reminder that justice is not always swift or easy, and sometimes the truth remains elusive. The psychological element is perhaps the most perplexing aspect of this case. The brothers' claims of years of abuse, while contested, added a layer of complexity to their motive. Whether their claims were true, partially true, or entirely fabricated remains a subject of debate. The defense's strategy to portray them as victims of parental abuse, while controversial, undoubtedly influenced public opinion and played a significant role in the initial mistrials. This case underscores the difficulties of disentangling truth from manipulation, especially in cases involving complex family dynamics and allegations of abuse. Precisely. The blurred lines between victim and perpetrator make this case particularly unsettling. The public's perception of the brothers shifted dramatically throughout the trials, reflecting the ambiguity surrounding their motivations. The media frenzy that surrounded the case also played a role, shaping public opinion and adding to the already complex narrative. The Menendez brothers' story became a cautionary tale, a glimpse into the dark underbelly of a seemingly perfect family. This case forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden behind facades of normalcy. The Menendez brothers weren't strangers lurking in the shadows. They were sons, friends, members of a community. This proximity to the ordinary makes their crimes all the more disturbing. It shatters the illusion that we can easily identify danger, that evil wears a recognizable face. Indeed, the case remains a chilling example of how appearances can be deceiving. The seemingly idyllic life of the Menendez family masked a deeply troubled dynamic, culminating in an act of unimaginable violence. The brothers' story continues to fascinate and horrify, serving as a stark reminder of the potential for darkness that resides within us all. It's a stark reminder of the human capacity for both love and violence, often intertwined in ways we can't fully comprehend. As we conclude this exploration of the Menendez brothers' case, we are left with lingering questions. Were they victims driven to desperation? Were they cold-blooded killers motivated by greed? Or perhaps, a disturbing combination of both? The answers, like the fragments of their shattered family portrait, remain scattered, elusive, and ultimately, deeply unsettling. This case serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the complexities of human nature, and the enduring power of secrets. And the most haunting question of all, perhaps, is how well do we really know those closest to us? How much darkness can hide in plain sight, masked by normalcy and privilege? Menendez brothers' story leaves us with a chill, a lingering unease, and a sobering reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in the who or the how, but in the why. And sometimes the why remains forever unanswered, a chilling echo in the quiet spaces of our understanding. Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time,
reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant. Goodbye.